Last week, we talked about frame rates and how they play a big part in setting the technical aesthetic of a video. To watch that, click here. But there's another aspect of shooting video that plays a big part in that, and if you read the episode's title, you know that's shutter speed. But what is shutter speed? In video, frame rate and shutter speeds are two sides of the same coin. While frame rate controls how often a picture is taken, shutter speed, or exposure length, controls how much time your camera spends collecting the light to make that picture. In cameras, the shutter is a mechanical device that controls how long the sensor is exposed to light. In cameras without a physical shutter, like cell phones or when you're doing digital videography, the shutter is software-based. Nevertheless, the longer the shutter is open, the more light is recorded by the sensor. In photography and videography alike, getting enough light into the camera is, well, it's a continual struggle. So why not bring the shutter speed down as low as it'll go? Just keep that shutter open as long as you can. Well, for starters, you can only slow the shutter down so much when videoing. If you've got a frame rate of 30 frames per second, you can't have that shutter open for any longer than 1/30th of a second. It just doesn't math. Okay, so you set the shutter speed to match the frame rate. Well, at 30 frames per second, you're gonna have some killer motion blur. 1/30th of a second is a long exposure for movement, and it makes it pretty smeary. To get the motion blur under control, you've gotta bring up the shutter speed. The faster your shutter speed, the crisper your image will be. But how fast do you make it? Remember, if it gets too fast, then you won't get enough light onto the sensor. Well, a good rule of thumb is that your shutter speed should be as close to double your frame rate as you can get. This will produce natural-looking motion blur. Of course, this is just a handy rule of thumb. Your artistic choices matter, and there are plenty of reasons to shoot with a higher shutter speed than just 2 times the frame rate. Fast-moving action sequences, like martial arts fighting, are often given more punch by shooting at a shorter exposure, letting you see every hit with crisp detail. But be careful, because this level of sharpness can be a double-edged sword. Going too high with your shutter speed can make your footage seem hyper-real, like TV news footage or sports coverage, and can feel out of place in, say, the context of a film. So that is something to watch out for. On the other end of the spectrum, you can of course increase the exposure time too, which will increase the motion blur. You'll often see this being used to give things a dreamy or disorienting visual aesthetic in films. Have a question about media that you're just burning to get answered? Then ask away in the comments below. If you like this show, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you really like this show, then why not support us on Patreon, just like these fine folks? Doing so will get you sneak peeks at future episodes and upcoming projects, as well as other perks like free images and video for you to use in your next project. Links to all of those up there and down in the doobly-doo.